Do you ever just hear a song and it takes you back to a specific moment in your life? The melodies and the memories that are so engraved into your brain that you just couldn't forget, even if you tried? For me, it's the song Heartbeat City by The Cars. As soon as I hear the synthesizer wash over me, I'm instantly taken back to my dad's 2003 Dodge Ram pickup, and we're in it driving into town to pick up some part for the farm. My dad and I both love The Cars, but funnily enough, Heartbeat City isn't either of our favorite song by them. But regardless, every time I hear it, I'm instantly taken back to an old blue pickup. To many people, music is just some beeps and boops, and yet, even if they think that way about music, it can still have a huge impact on the way that they feel. When it comes to media, be it movies, TV shows, games, and more, music is often used to influence the way we feel and think about specific things. It's used to engage the audience, help them relate to the story, and oftentimes to tell the story on a deeper level. Certain songs can even be written or used to evoke specific emotions in us. Music can help us form memories of distinct items, people, situations, or ideas, just like how for me, Heartbeat City is tied to an old blue pickup. One of the ways that media is able to do this is by utilizing themes, specifically reoccurring themes called leitmotifs. Leitmotifs are used when composers and writers want their audience to associate an idea to something specific. More often than not, these melodies are attached to characters and applied to specific actions and reactions and more. They don't have to be attached to characters either. They could align with a thing or an idea, much like the theme you're hearing right now, which is the main theme for Apex Legends. Leitmotifs are typically small phrases in music, and in the case of Apex Legends, I believe the motif to be these 5 notes, instead of the song as a whole. They are used in each of the drop themes, which play at the start of each game, ultimately signifying the start of the Apex games. You hear leitmotifs all over the place, from Hunger Games, Impossible,
What up, Wade?
to the Twilight Zone, and more. They are used in just about any and every piece of media out there, and I wanted to focus on some specific motifs across different media. This video isn't just about leitmotifs, but I'd be remiss if I didn't go into at least a little detail on them. In my opinion, they play a huge role in making us feel things when we consume media, and going further, leitmotifs and themes for that matter will be brought up throughout the whole video. Pirates of the Caribbean is a classic. The movie is incredibly fun and surprisingly still holds up well today. The score for the film, composed by Klaus Baldet with Hans Zimmer as well, is equally as timeless and was surprisingly written in a short amount of time. Even still, the soundtrack fits the movie perfectly, with one specific standout. The Medallion Calls is the piece that is playing when we are first introduced to Jack Sparrow, and it contains a motif that I attribute to the character of Jack Sparrow. That motif more or less becomes the "look, Jack Sparrow's doing something cool" theme. The first time you hear it, he nonchalantly floats on in a sinking ship and then steps onto the dock just as it sinks into the ocean. And the next time you hear it though is when it changes from a simple theme into more of a leitmotif proper. Elizabeth falls into the sea due to suffocating in her tight clothing, and no one seems to want to jump in after her and save her, so Jack takes it upon himself to do so. Just as he's jumping off the ship, you hear the first 6 notes of his motif. Here is where that melody is assigned to him. Before it was just a theme, but now it is his leitmotif. Specifically, the Jack Sparrow is a badass leitmotif. He saves Elizabeth, and then as the scene progresses, he has to escape from the Marines. During the escape, the main theme of the show can be heard playing in the background, and the moment he gets away, you finally get to hear the rest of the melody in the leitmotif, closing out the scene. The whole film goes back and forth with this theme and the main theme, which I'm sure many of you know. The main theme is littered all throughout the movie, and it sort of acts as a little motif of its own. But wait a second though, this isn't it. This is actually Battle on the Seas from Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Look, I couldn't not talk about Xenoblade when I'm doing a video on music. And interestingly enough, this song actually has some motifs to it. You can hear a bit of Era C from the first game near the beginning of the song, and the soundtrack of the third game in the series is full of little motifs from the 2 prior games, but I wanted to focus instead on a motif that's specific to this game. We'll also talk a bit about Xenoblade 2, but for now, here's A Life Sent On. A Life Sent On composes two melodies, the Agnian off-seeing tune and the Kavesi off-seeing tune. These two melodies appear frequently and all over the place throughout the whole game. Now you're hearing the version that appears on the main menu. The theme represents life and death, but it also represents the two main characters, Noah and Mio, as well as their journey through life. It shows the relationship that they have with each other, their friends, and the world that they live in. In the game, they're divided into two factions, and the melody acts as a sort of connection in their opposing lives. Another song where the off-sing motif can be found is in Weight of Life, which if you've seen the memes from the 2022 Game Awards, you know that some kid praised Bill Clinton or something, and that flute guy absolutely killed it during the musical melody. The part that he's playing is the Offseer Leitmotif. The song Weight of Life serves as sort of role in Xenoblade 3, as well as its two older siblings, Engage the Enemy and Counterattack. In the first and second game respectively. Weight of Life even goes so far as to call back to its progenitors with subtle melodies. Not only that, but Counterattack from the second game even calls back to Engage the Enemy from the first game. A lot of the songs in all three of the main Xenoblade games serve the same purpose. For unique monsters, you have the Know Our Name tracks. The, hey, we're in a big open green area. And of course, the emotional and commemorative themes. Xenoblade 2 calls on a leitmotif throughout the whole game that is used time and time again. This motif is used to represent the relationship between the main character Rex and the Aegis, Pyra, and Mithra. Each time it's played throughout the story, it's like a new emotion is added to its repertoire, and by the end of the game, all of those emotions come bursting out like a waterfall. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a show that defied many people's assumptions ever since it first aired. Growing up, my brother and I would watch each episode as it would air on Nickelodeon. It was probably the first real serialized show that I watched in my life, but back then, I'm not quite sure if I fully grasped everything that the show did. Yet, even with my dumb kid brain, the famous scene in the episode Tales of Ba Sing Se still resonated with me, as I'm sure it did with many others. The music in Avatar is presented throughout the duration of the series. From the beginning, it had an impact on the story and helped tell the story on a passive level. The cast, more specifically Aang and Zuko, are personified through the music in the show, each having their own motif that plays much like Jack Sparrow's whenever they do something on screen. Zuko actually gets two, which symbolizes the sway of his character arc. There's a whole video by Sideways on the music in Avatar, which is where I came to appreciate these motifs. Aang sorta also gets two, being the Avatar theme, as well as the more simple down-to-earth tune that I attribute directly to Aang, and not the Avatar as a whole. Both melodies are very similar, but they play slightly different notes. You can hear both in the main theme here. The melody we associate with Aang the Avatar, or the main theme, is confident and strong, while the one I'm associating with Aang the person feels a little insecure but reverent. It reminds me of how Aang grows into his role as the Avatar throughout the whole show. Aang's main internal conflict is coming to terms with the fact that he is the Avatar and accepting the role that has been placed upon him. The motif is also used in the track Avatar State. In the early episodes, and well honestly in most of the whole show, Aang doesn't really have full control over the Avatar state. It comes out when he's dealing with intense stress and emotional trauma. The Avatar state is essentially the power of all previous Avatar manifesting in the current one. You could almost say that when Aang goes into the Avatar state that it really isn't him. In fact, there are times when he goes into it that it 100% isn't him, but within the song you still hear the motive that I associate with Aang, almost saying that he's still in there somewhere. Most people that are in the vicinity of Aang when he goes into the Avatar state get scared of this overwhelming power, but Katara almost always steps in, knowing that Aang is still there deep inside, and she saves him. Ellie's theme from the Disney Pixar movie Up is probably one of the most recognizable themes in mainstream animation. I say this for two reasons. One, because of course, it's Disney Pixar. So many people around the world watch their films. And two, because of the power and the weight that is imbued into these simple notes. Simply put, they're memorable. As many of you know, the opening scenes of the movie depict a quick yet emotional story between Carl and Ellie. You see their life in the span of only a couple minutes, and all throughout, the song Married Life is being played in the background, which has in it many different renditions of Ellie's theme or motif. The theme sticks with us because of the impactful short story told. It's often related to sadness, but I don't think that's what the film or the composer wants you to remember it for. The melody is meant to remind the viewer, just like Carl, of all of the happy and sad times that life brings, particularly with the ones that you love. Life is full of ups and downs. I think that's the point of the story. Sure, life isn't always full of happy times, and even with the setbacks and sadnesses, it's important to look up and see what else life has in store for you. Ellie's theme is played multiple times in the film, typically when Carl thinks of her, but it's not just played in remembrance of her, it's also a song of reflection, recalling her life as well as what it stood for, and by the end, it becomes a song of looking toward the future. On that note, let's talk about another character theme that hits a specific group of people in the feels. Back when I was in high school, I worked at a local video game store, and at the store, I had a number of coworkers that I became friends with. Most of my coworkers, however, weren't really into video games as much as I was, and so most of our conversations just ended up being about school and the like. Eventually, someone new started working there, and luckily for me, he was also very much so into video games. He was also about 15 or so years older than me, so I sort of looked up to him with his vast wealth of video game knowledge. He'd tell me about games that he liked and games that he thought that I would like. Oftentimes, he'd tell me stories about games when they first came out. One such time is when he told me about Final Fantasy VII and when it first came out for the PlayStation in 1997. I was only like 4 months old, and he was at least in his teens. This story will contain spoilers for Final Fantasy VII, so just be warned. Anyway, he told me how he got the game on release day and played all day and all night. Back then, large video games would take up multiple discs due to the small storage capacity. After reaching the end of content on one disc, you'd have to take it out and put in the next to continue the story. He reached the famous scene where Sephiroth descends and kills Aerith in front of the party. He went on and played through the rest of the scene and eventually reached the "Please insert disc 2" screen. Only when he went to put in disc 2, it wouldn't read. No matter what he tried, he couldn't get disc 2 to read. He sat there in shock, just staring at the screen, bawling his eyes out while Aerith's theme kept on playing despite it all. Music is no stranger to death. In media, most of the heaviest emotions are bound to a song, but when death is all around, it's the themes that promote something else that tend to resonate with us stronger. When it comes to storytelling in video games, few compare to the pacing and emotions in The Last of Us. Not to say that other games can't tell a good emotional story, I'm just saying that The Last of Us has probably done it better than most that came before and after. The marriage between gameplay and story is just short of perfection, and the music that drives that marriage home is perfect. Composed by Gustavo Santaolalla, the soundtrack of The Last of Us sets the tone of the game and forces players to become immersed in the dystopian world. The same can be said about the television adaptation on HBO, because of course, using the same music from the game would have the same effect on the TV show. The TV show uses the soundtrack in every opportunity given and adds other meaningful songs as well. Of all the tracks in The Last of Us, none hit harder to me than The Path, A New Beginning. This song is used at the closing of the game to great effect. Due to the circumstances of the final scene, players are left feeling desolate and uncertain. The path not only adds to this, but adds emotions of anticipation and hope, which is a perfect way to feel at the end of the game. The TV show uses this song during episode 6, and when I first heard it here, I was a bit disappointed. But then the thought came to me that maybe they're using this song here to set it up even more for the ending. Using the path here can let the viewers apply it to Joel and Ellie's relationship. It shows their trust in each other, and you can surmise that they care a lot for each other at this point. Associating it with the relationship between the two has certain implications for people who have played the game. And if things play out in a similar way in the TV show, then I can only imagine how much more of an impact it will have in the end. Music is often made to tug on specific emotions, and if done right, can make you happy, sad, excited, or scared. Some songs you hear are obviously made to make you sad. You tend to listen to these songs when you're feeling down, and you may even have a playlist of these sad songs to play when you for some reason want to feel sad. In media, sometimes songs are made and paired with scenes for the specific purpose of making you feel an emotion. The writer wants the audience to feel something distinct, so they will often have music that ingrains emotions into their audience. The game To the Moon does this with its main theme, For River. You will hear this song and its many variations for the duration of the game. It introduces players to it without context at first, only to bind it with the relationship of Johnny and River. Players get to see the hopes and dreams of the two characters, as well as their struggles and concerns from an outside perspective. As you get pieces of the puzzle, the song takes on new meaning, and in the end, when you hear it, all of the memories will come rushing back. It's a beautiful game with a beautiful story and soundtrack. But music isn't just made to make you sad or happy, it can do so much more. Hans Zimmer is one of the greats when it comes to scoring soundtracks for movies. His compositions are heard in some of the most popular films, and they do a phenomenal job at compelling their audience to feel different emotions. Inception's Time is a reflective piece that makes listeners, much like the movie, look inward and discover something new about themselves. Gladiator's Now We Are Free is empowering and gives the feeling of independence. I'd share more, but I already fear copyright strikes enough with this video. These two tracks are just a little glimpse into Zimmer's repertoire, alongside Pirates of the Caribbean that we talked about earlier. Each of his soundtracks fit the movie they portray spectacularly. They are recognizable and, most importantly, make you feel what they are supposed to. Soundtracks like the ones that Hans Zimmer creates are most often paired with media that complement each other's tones. So, how about a soundtrack that opposes the implied tone, but still works?
It's a lie!
Okay, maybe not completely a lie, but the soundtrack to the video game trilogy Danganronpa does that and more. The music in Danganronpa lies to its audience by filling them with a false sense of security. Tracks like Beautiful Days are used to detract from the murderous undertone found through the whole game. Beautiful Days plays during the sections of the game where players have slice-of-life moments and hang out with the other characters in the game. This acts as a sort of ruse. While it does intentionally exist to make players fond of the cast of each game, it's also there to set up theoretical and potential betrayals when you find out there was a murder. And therein lies the dichotomy of Danganronpa. One half you get to know the cast, and the other half you're trying to figure out which member of the cast is a murderer. All the while, this banger of a track plays during the detective stage. Like, I know there's a dead body right there, but I just can't stop grooving. Box 15 is such a perfect song for this game. It fits the wacky tone of Danganronpa, but doesn't fit the tone of what you're doing. But it also kinda does, and that's honestly the soundtrack of the whole series. You feel that the music shouldn't fit with the themes and tones of what is actually going on, but it works. Amidst the soundtrack of the Danganronpa trilogy is a certain track that also fits the bill that Danganronpa calls for. It's a song that seemingly can fit in any circumstance, and when you hear it, a swarm of different emotions may overwhelm you, simply because of the piece's use throughout a multitude of different media. This is a perfect sound for any emotion, truly a song that can be used in any situation and bring out intended emotions. It's a reflective, sad, encouraging, contemplative, happy, safe, and more kind of song. And Clair De Lune isn't the only song that can be used this way, but I feel that it's the epitome of background music, and I wanted to call attention to it. Honestly, all of this music can really just be summed up as background music. Some take a more prominent role while others are content staying in the background. Yet, it isn't till it's gone that it calls attention to itself. As powerful as music can be, sometimes it's the lack thereof that adds a new power. It's why games like Zelda Breath of the Wild don't have a bombastic and present soundtrack like prior Zelda games did. It lets the viewer contemplate what huge and impactful thing that they just saw, as it does during the end of Avengers Infinity War. And like in episode 22 of the anime 86, it forces the viewer to make up their own emotions and grasp just how they feel about a given narrative. Music is the companion piece to so much of the media that we consume. Even when I'm consuming something that doesn't have sound, like a comic or a book, I often play music in the background. And if a song is referenced in something without music, I will always pull up that song and play as I continue. Music just has that special something. It can pull up specific emotions that we may have forgotten, especially when using specific melodies. It can amplify any entertainment media, even if it is just beeps and boops. So why does music and media make us feel things? Because it's supposed to.